Hello, I'm Aluka, a 3D print artist, and I'll be making a gingerbread house. Yes, I miss Christmas, and that's okay because my most recent video is Mark Styles, who still outperforms my recent videos. I'm saying all this to say if people watch your Halloween video in December, they'll watch your Christmas video in January, or at least I hope so. This build is incredibly simple, and I made it on the smaller side so I can maximize the details. When I want to make something, I tend to make it on the larger side, which means more time and makes me feel burnt out. I want the walls to be able to support the roof and the snow, so I add an extra layer to them. Then I fill in that layer, making sure not to create many gaps. Now I'm left with a rectangular filament, and I make all the other pieces the exact same way. To smooth out all the pieces, I'm using an iron because smoothing them out by hand would drive me crazy. Parchment paper is the best, but I only have tracing paper, which means it'll stick, but it will get the job done. To make the walls as perfect as possible, I'll be using a roller, which didn't really work, and you'll see why in a minute. I brought this brand new tool just to use the hot knife tips, and it didn't work. Not because it didn't turn on, but because they had the rock tighten this tip on and I literally couldn't get it off. So now we go back to the plastic ruler, which I'm using a very hot soldering iron to trace with, which obviously melted the ruler, so everything else was eyeballed. I do have a metal ruler, I just couldn't find it. I mean, it could definitely look worse. Then I use my soldering iron to shape up the windows. Here's how all the pieces looked when I was done cutting them. Now it was time to put them all together. Sometimes I wonder if using a 3D pen would make me a good welder, and I remember that I'm left-handed and I would probably die. I barely survived right-handed notebooks in school. Smudging all my hard work still scars me to this day. I also made a side part of the house, which is basically the house template but dialed down. This template will be in the description. To make the painting process easier, if you don't know, I hate painting. I'll be using magnets to make the house connect. My hand was cramping so badly, this was hours of work. I took a break, came back, and smoothed out all the added filament. I separated the side house from the main house for the magnets. This also took a really long time, mostly due to lining up the magnets in the correct position so they fit. I swapped the smaller magnets for larger ones because I didn't think they would hold up the weight of everything. You can see a lot of cracks in the walls because they weren't cut perfectly. All this will be covered in snow. Before that, it's time to add the window frames. The simplest way to do this was some painter's tape around the edges and a thin layer of filament on top. I didn't want it to look too perfect and faked. I wanted it to look like an actual gingerbread house, so I kept all the imperfections mostly. When it came to the window frames, I didn't sand the edges at all. Moving those aside to make sure you don't lose any. Then it was time to deal with the roof. I used a pencil to create a line long enough and made a basic roof pattern. For some reason, this hurt my wrist a lot, and I think it was the motion to create the bottom. Also, none of these are the exact same. I did a rough estimate, I did a measure, and I figured I needed around 6 for the big roof and 4 for the small roof. The final part was smoothing them out, and that hurt a lot less than making them. When I added the first piece, I smoothed out the side. I realized later smoothing out the top looks a lot better. My calculations were off, but I ended up making way too many pieces anyways, so it didn't really matter. Now, time for the snow. I added more painter's tape, but in spots I thought would have more snow, which was pretty much the whole roof. Then used my 3D pen to completely fill in the roof. This took around 1.5 hours alone. Only if I could do a time skip in real life. Figuring out how to do the snow pattern was a bit difficult. I figured I could just leave it alone, but decided smoothing it out would look better. I added a couple dents in the snow, then realized I hated it and switched to my Clover Mini iron to smooth it down. Then I thought of adding swirls from my 3D pen, and I liked it, so I added it to the whole thing. The swirls alone look out of place, so I smoothed out the edges and the inside. For the smaller roof, I added lines to add some contrast. The snow pieces were 50-50 between both designs. It honestly turned out way better than I thought, and the reason I used painter's tape was so I can paint the snow separately, otherwise everything was primed white and I would have shown you if I pressed record. Thankfully, snow is already white, so I only have to paint the walls. I'll be using my airbrush to do this, and honestly this is a great buy. I can't ever seem to get the brush strokes out of my final project, which makes them look messy. This solves the problem completely and makes it look neat. The problem is getting the right paint consistency. This was very easy to paint, but to make the solid brown look better, I went around the edges with a darker brown. To ensure it looked like a gingerbread house, I made these candies and painted them green and red. And with that, everything is ready. I did have to cut the snow around the chimney because it didn't fit and scraped up some of the paint, but ignore that and focus on how good the snow looks. To add the snow on, I'll be using super glue, which turned out to be really annoying because I had to hold it tight for like 3 minutes for every piece. Now, for the window frames, I also ended up making some window snow. This was my first time seeing all the snow pieces on. I didn't do any test pieces and it looked exactly how I imagined. The final snow pieces were the gap fillers of the roof. I lost this window frame, by the way. This already looks amazing, but I have an idea. I made the window glass out of clear filament, which gave the bonus effect of frost. And I almost completely forgot about this candy. And I think it makes it look 1,000 times better. The last thing that needed to be added to the roof was some snow. I just used a paintbrush and some white paint. I liked the way it looked on the roof so much I added it to the walls, and honestly it fits. The snow ended up on some of the candy and that really sells it. Time for the lights, which are the exact same lights from my Monsters video, and I had no clue still worked. I gambled and it paid off. I'm very late, but Merry Christmas, and I'm one day early, but Happy New Year's.